Simon Caine, hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, mate. You can hear me all right?
I can. Am I too fluorescent? I was going to ask you before, because we were talking about this before, and I feel I've got my sad light. I forgot what they're called, but they stop me from being sad when don't get enough natural light in the winter.
Right. Because we are Sunday morning New Zealand time, Saturday evening UK time.
Right. For me it's 10 o'clock.
Yeah, so it's 11ish a.m. here. I don't know. Yeah, 11 in the morning here. We've
So
got
I'm not.
we've got daylight savings next weekend. I was thinking with this whole coronavirus thing, it's going to be really weird. Okay, so in New Zealand, as you know, okay, let's take two steps backwards. You and me
Yeah.
connected, what, maybe 6 months ago?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, 6 months.
Because you were coming to Dunedin fresh off a red hot show at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival,
Yes.
to do
Mm.
the Dunedin Fringe.
Mm.
And so we
And
connected somehow. I can't remember how. And you were like, "I'm a podcaster in the UK," and I'm like, "We do podcasts in Dunedin. Let's do podcasts together." I think we even talked about you coming into my studio and doing
yeah,
one, and maybe me doing one with you as well, and kind of doing two or something. Anyway,
yeah,
recent events have seen a a pretty significant change,
yeah, a little bit.
and yeah, now we're here, and I'm in my bedroom, as you can see, and they're my curtains. And as you can
Yeah,
see, it is daylight because there's the sun up there.
yeah.
Um, and there's all sorts of stuff going on. But I don't say it's the weirdest. It's a weird time at the moment. One of the weird things I realized yesterday is we're fucking going into daylight savings tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Next weekend. So not only are we in this middle of this, what sometimes feels like an apocalyptic kind of change in life,
Mm.
next week everything's going to be different with our environment as well. It's going to be darker earlier and lighter earlier in the morning, and
Mm.
so it's very, very strange. It's a very strange time.
We have our daylight savings tonight.
Okay.
So
So in the UK, look, I don't want to see anybody get this horrible virus. But watching Boris Johnson 4 weeks ago going, "Well, I was in the hospital and I shook everybody's hand," and blah, 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 blah. He literally said he went to the hospital where some cases were and shook everybody's hand. And yesterday, New Zealand time, Boris Johnson has been confirmed with the coronavirus. It's like, oh, duh. So
it was
I don't wish this on anybody, but there
no.
was can I be afforded? Can people be gracious? And can I just have 1% for 1 second, a bit of a laugh when I heard that?
So this is the thing, and I will speak on behalf of British people for this one because I would love to know what the Australian. Because here's the thing, and we can talk about this in a sec. But my parents and my friends were very much like, "Come home," and I was like, "Why? Why?"
You and me talked about that. I actually said stay.
Yeah,
I actually said you
yeah,
come crash with me.
yeah,
This feels safer than the UK.
yeah. Well, not just that. Although New Zealand is taking it a lot more seriously now, and they definitely were taking it seriously when I was there,
Yeah.
they were not anywhere near the um, fear mongering that we're getting at here. And
Right.
also, British people are being fucking stupid, and it's becoming a real frustration for me because I've come home. I'm home now. Spoiler: I'm not in your bedroom. I'm not in like another room in your house,
Next
just
door.
like hiding
Yeah,
to
we're
make the
getting,
stream
this is
work.
a setup, fake news and all that stuff.
Yeah. But it's yeah, no, here everybody's, even my girlfriend's very, very level-headed and doesn't really do conspiracy theory. I mean, I love reading them, but I
Yeah,
don't believe in any of them.
sure.
And she even said to me, like, I'm convinced Boris hasn't got it. I think he just can't bother with the
Oh,
press.
fuck.
And I'm like, if even you're my fucking rock in all this. If you are all of a sudden going down the rabbit hole, what is going on? So, um, here it's so sorry. Just to answer your yes, you can be afforded that, and I think the Schadenfreude, is that the right word? I think that's the right
Oh,
word.
yeah.
Of someone going, oh, I'll just go shake everyone's hand in a hospital, and then getting a disease. It's quite funny. I'm not going to deny that. However, the reaction in the left wing artsy crowd of yay, he might die
Yeah.
is fucking just disgusting. I'm like, look, you don't have to like him. You don't have to say you voted for him. You don't have to, believe in him or like him. But don't wish him dead by this fucking disease. Like, that is an opportunity for the left. And I don't want to politicize this too early, but that is an opportunity for the left to be like, we're going to elevate ourselves and we're going to get back to being what the left, I feel, is about, which is being more for everyone rather than the right, which is for the rich in a general sense.
Yeah, I just touched my face. I realised that, but I washed my hands before we started, so I'm all right.
I'm not going to pick on anyone. I'm going to assume you have your own hygiene.
You know what? It's so funny you would say that about the left in the UK, what's happening at the moment, because I have to say, I've just written a piece on my blog, and for some reason I've had security put on my blog that people need to join and be members, so I'm trying to take that down. But about the Joe Biden sexual assault allegations. And
okay,
you haven't heard about this?
I haven't been. I honestly,
that's part of the problem. But honestly, that's part of the problem. It's like the left wing, the left media, and I've basically written a piece that said, I mean, you're kind of keep abreast of things politically in general. There was the Justice Kavanaugh situation with Christine Blasey Ford, who made some allegations against him before the Supreme Court nomination, and the left went, believe all women. And the left went, why would she come forward? What she got to gain? And they had this list of criteria as to why she was credible. So all I've said is, if that's good enough for Kavanaugh, and I agree with that, right? I'm on board with that about Kavanaugh. But if it's good enough for him, then actually it's good enough for Biden. And actually, why would this woman come forward? What's in it for her? I actually don't. I think believe all women's a bit one step too far. And in general, I'll start by saying with men, because people will attack me, but people lie and people get mistaken. I think you believe all credible stories, whether it's male or female. But what I'm saying is the left had this line of believe all women. And Joe, in my blog post, patbritton.com, you can actually, I've actually listed the quote from Joe Biden where he says, believe all women. So it's like, it's now the left is ignoring this, going, I'm saying you can't do that. You can't actually have this criteria out there when it's someone on the right that you then don't instill on yourself, or else you're the worst part of politics, which I guess is what they are.
Yeah. I'm gonna hope that what I say now doesn't get quoted out of context, because it's a constant
clip.
Well, I think you know how they used to say women's greatest fear in life is getting murdered or raped, and men's biggest fear is getting meeting up with a fat girl or something like that.
Well, okay, I haven't heard that before, but fair enough.
That's like a thing that we get told out here, or there's like a thing moving on like that. I think an additional fear now is that we're going to have something screenshotted out of context and get cancelled. I think that's a genuine fear now. Well, I think the problem. Okay, again, hear the whole thing before you cut it.
I'll sit back.
I think the problem with the believe all women thing is that the people who would say it have friends who are almost certainly never going to lie about something like that, and so as a result, you in your circle would believe that. I would, or any friend of mine would say that, and I'd go, well, yeah, none of them want to lie. A bit like most people, and not all, obviously, but most people who would say not all men, it's because their friends who they wouldn't want to believe would do something like that.
Totally.
And they are trying, and as a result, they're overlooking the fact that there are people outside of their friendship circle who are definitely doing that.
Yeah.
So, and again, there's more men who are doing bad things than women, statistically, but there is almost, I think there's fewer and far between now. I think fewer women are lying or would want to lie now than maybe when a movement started, because now it's much easier to be found out and discredit the whole movement and get shamed crazily by this mob if they were lying. So I think the believe all women I'm more for now than I've ever been.
And look, I want to also concur with what you're saying, the themes of what you're saying, because I struggle to think that a woman would come forward with a false allegation.
Yeah, same.
The carte blanche, believe all, I don't care what the group is, believe all elderly people, believe all, maybe not children, no one would do that. I just think that there are enough anomalies in that to kind of go, well, let's just take at least a half step back from that and go, take the complaint seriously and investigate. You know what I mean? I know that's not quite as pithy, and maybe that doesn't work as well, but that's sort of, but the point being, and kind of what you're saying about I mean, you just flip it. If the right was saying that about a left-wing leader, I hope they die, the left would be up in arms. It's why I mean, I'm firmly on the left of politics, but I'm not. I can't stand the woke culture. I just can't. I think it's problematic. I think it's counterproductive. I think it's unintelligent. And you see it all over the place. It's the culture that says we will follow science for this aspect of our thought belief. Let's say the climate change conversation. The reason that we believe this and sell this to our friends and our arguments is because of science, and then they go, well, actually, but we do this argument, let's say the gender conversation, based on sociological issues, and they ignore science in that. So I'm just like, I'll just be me, and I'll annoy, and I'll never fit in, and the right won't like me because I'm too liberal, and the left won't like me because I'm not fully on board with the woke culture. I'll just be me, and I'm actually kind of cool with that. I can enjoy Dave Chappelle without thinking he should be cancelled.
No, what gets me about it, is a similar thing to you. I mean, woke culture, I mean, I was trying to write a joke a while ago about how I think the easier the phrase is to remember, the more it's had the nuance chipped away at it, which means that it probably isn't going to be useful in your life. Actual advice is harder to remember and applicable because you've got to keep it going. Whereas believe all women, or always be nice, or always be kind, or any of these sort of things, they're just too vague. They're too all encapsulating. And when it comes down to the problem with saying stuff like this, especially two white men saying stuff like this, is it can be misinterpreted as not believing or being anti whatever. And I mean, ultimately, I think if you are a believe all women person, as in that's your line, and it doesn't matter case by case, you're being anti-due process. And if you're being anti-due process, you think you're above the law. And if you think you're above the law, I don't have time for you, because I think that means you're saying that you should be allowed to do things that I'm not allowed to do, and there's no equality in that as far as I can work out.
Yeah. It's an interesting point you make about due process, because if you have, and I want to stop. I'm personally going to stop using for this conversation the woman aspect, because I don't care. I don't care what the protected group is. Believe all X. Doesn't matter whatever it is. If you do that, believe all. Let's say elderly people, because for some reason that feels less offensive. Believe all elderly people. Then anything that happens to a retired person, an OAP. Well, there you go. Why have the courts just kind of convict that person of whatever it was, and don't be done with it?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that funny though? Like just the fact that you want to change it from women to anything else, so that we're not out of context, and so that because that's either because we're trying to make the point so that other people who listen in can empathize with it and go, oh, okay, yeah, if you tried it with some other group. But ultimately, I think with this, it has to stay. I mean, we can move it to another group if you want, but I think it has to stay with that group, just because there is no other group that's requiring that or asking for that. There's never been another group of people and by group of people I just mean one gender, that's ever sort of said, and actually that's not true, because I mean, I don't want to say it like that, because it's basically any group of gender, who isn't male essentially, are asking for that. I mean, obviously not all of them, hashtag not all women, but I would say that I've never seen something like that in my life. I've never seen any group of people.
But I think that just goes to show the ludicrous nature of the statement.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's a bit like in this day and age, being able to swap into a different protected group. I mean, protected groups are there for discrimination issues.
Yeah.
People can now change between them basically at will. So if we've never heard another believe all disabled people, there you go. There's another protected group. that just goes to show the ludicrous nature of believe any one particular protected group, because if it was a norm and accepted, then all of the groups would have had a time to do that. So, I mean, you could, the counterpoint to that could be, this is the first of them all doing that, but I don't think that's the case.
No, for me, it's a really interesting, and especially with the whole woke culture stuff. I mean, what's incredible to me is when I first encountered any level of woke culture, possibly 3 years ago was probably the earliest I could remember, and it wasn't even really, there was no label for it. It was more a conversation about equality and meritocracy and just stuff on the comedy circuit, essentially, that would coming out about systematic issues. So it wasn't really, it wasn't called that. It had a really good message, and it had a really good logical conversation happening around it. And gradually, very privileged people have started to own this conversation. And whenever I talk to Black comedians or any comedians of color, any group of people that are not white male comedians about these subjects, they're very nuanced, and they've generally got a point of view that is not shared by the woke community. And it seems really odd that I did a gig before all this shit hit the fan with two friends of mine who are both Black male comedians, and one of them said they're fine with comedians of color, and one of them said they find that really offensive. And we had like a proper nice little debate about it, about why they think that, why they, whatever. And yet both of them were like, we wouldn't express this to a woke crowd, because if you do that, they'll either go, oh, you're confusing us. Why are you giving us mixed signals? Because they just want like a bite. That's all the woke crowd want, is they want an easy answer so that they don't have to, so they know what's right and wrong. And really, in this day and age, it's not as simple as that. Everything's not black and white. And it's, it's weird.
Do you find that you have concerns? Because I know I do. Some of my thoughts and opinions that I express, I know that people who are completely counter to me politically sort of agree with as well, and then often use similar arguments. And so when I talk about, do we base our truths on science, or do we base them on sociology, or is there a nuance between them? Then let's say the alt-right at the moment will just say that they'll do the reverse. They won't base their climate change conversations on science. They'll blame it on, what difference can we make? Basically a sociological, it's not, but that side of it. And they will then base their gender conversations on what science is saying at the moment about, the male to female transitioning athletes, for example, having an advantage. Just one example, don't need to get into that big conversation, but they'll base it on what science is saying. And I'm like, geez, I've written over I don't blog very much, but I used to blog more when I was doing it more regularly. I've written several times where I'm just like saying to the left, don't make me side with these right-wing nutters, but in this instance, they're right. This is somewhere where you guys, I guess, if you include me in there, have this idea skewed, and we need. And Joe Biden's a perfect example. We need to stop being we the left in general.
Yep. I mean, one of the jokes that I really loved from this year's show, which I hate to be like this because I feel like I'm quoting myself, was about how I hate when you agree with someone and at the end they say something stupid and you have to question if you're a moron. Right. And it happens increasingly often where we sat there going, but hang on, hang on. And it's stuff like that happens a lot where when I'm talking to I am a left-wing person, but I often tell people I'm centre-left, which probably does articulate a lot more of my ideology. But I used to tell people I was far-left, and then I met online a lot of far-left people, and it made me go, well, hang on.
You mean they don't represent me? That's not me.
They don't, and I don't want people getting that wrong. And But what that did was that meant that because I was sent, by the way, it makes it sound like I literally moved from one group to the middle and then I was near right-wing people. But it generally did make me go, well, hang on, let me question some of these very idealistic ideals that I've got that sort of make me and those people that I don't like the sound of go off on one.
Yeah.
And it made me look up people on Twitter who were right wing and actually follow some different people who I wouldn't normally look into and try and start reading things. You know, I don't do it as much as I should do, and it's only because I find it annoying and frustrating. And I don't think you should have to consume things that you don't like all the time if you don't want to. That's the point of the internet, isn't it? But in terms of what you're saying, yeah, it happens to me a lot where I'll have a view or an ideology, and I will be siding more with right-wing people than left-wing people because of the way that it's coming out, and I think it's because I don't know. I think left-wing people I think left-wing people more than any other think that this is us versus them. I remember in the run-up to our election in the UK, I posted a thing on Facebook that said, if you're going to vote Tory, could you please just DM me because I'd love to talk to you about it.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to attack you. I don't want to do whatever. I'm just wondering why you're voting for them, because all the things I'm reading tell me that you're wrong. And I don't, and I genuinely, and not in a nice way, I just want to know why you'd vote for something that I would assume is wrong. And the thing that came out of every conversation, I probably had 20. So it wasn't a large sample group, but it was a fair number that I don't think most people would do. And at the end of all the conversations, me and them, as in any one of that group said, was the one thing we want out of this election is we don't want there to be as much separation between the right and the left. We don't want there to be this split in the country. Whereas every time I spoke to left-wing people, they would go, well, no, but they're wrong. They're bad guys. We're the good guys. And I'm like, surely in life, we're all the bad guy and the good guy at some days.
Okay, let me give you a perspective on that. I'm going to burp again because I'm drinking Pepsi Max. Hang on.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm not professional in what I do in the slightest. Let me give you a perspective on that, because I did talkback. I was a talkback host in New Zealand for a decade, 7 years, sort of full time. You know, station I worked for was the biggest in the country. And it was listeners and certainly callers would lean very much to the right wing. The reason the right in general can say, oh, you know, I don't want as big a gap in general, is because what they're saying is, I want them to be like me. Because I used to have the same conversations with callers where they'd talk about migrants to the country. You know, we should all be one. We should all be one. And what they're saying is, could you please drop your fucking culture and be a bit more like me? To which my typical response to them was always, well, there's like 3 ways that we can get closer, right? They, whoever the they is, let's say it's the woke left or the migrant or the whatever, they can be like you, or you can be like them, or we can maybe meet somewhere in the middle. So my challenge was always, if your primary objective is really to be one group, then why don't you go be like them? And that makes us one group. I mean, the reality is, we would hope in that example, meeting in the middle would be something. But the thing about the right saying that in general, in my opinion, from that, you know, that's tens of thousands of conversations, literally, is they're immovable. They might say that, but they're also immovable in their positions. So I actually think it's a bit of a red herring.
No. Sorry, I will caveat what I was saying then, because I completely agree with that. Because in the same way the left would say, we want everyone to be more similar. It's the same thing. What you mean is you want everyone to be the same as you. What my specific conversations were about were Brexit. And the key players in that. So I would say 15 or 16 people I spoke to had legitimate border and people issues in the country that I would not call racist. But I would say about 5, which when you extrapolate it out is something like 20%, did have race-based issues with border control in the country.
Right.
As a result, it challenged my perceptions on that, because, you know, we are a limited space, and I work in London frequently. You know, there is not enough room in London for everyone that wants to live in London.
Yep.
You know, it's just not possible. So stuff like that really made me sort of question things. But I do agree with you. I do completely agree that a lot of people who say it want everyone to think like them, and they don't want to do any of the work.
And let me say, to be fair to those right-wing talkback callers, probably the first time I've thought about it, just really from what you said then, is the same is going to be said to the woke guys as well. I mean, they're not going to move on their, you know, on their positions in the slightest. So maybe that would also say that at least the left's, those people that you talk to, or those people in general, are being more honest. They're kind of like saying, no, I'm not moving. Whereas maybe the right perspective, you know, I don't know what it's like in the UK, but certainly, I mean, I look to American politics a lot. I'm a little bit addicted to it. And it's a bit the same in New Zealand about if you're kind of a conservative Christian, you're typically on the right. And you can do that whole kind of, you know, I love my neighbor, I love this, I love that. And so you can put out this idea of, oh, if we could only just all be one, wouldn't that be lovely? But if you delve into it, they're like going, you know, they need to find Jesus. They're not quite saying that, but they're just saying they need to be more like us. Whereas, the woke people are going like, fuck you guys on the right. I don't want to be like you. I'm not moving. But maybe that's as problematic, but more honest.
I think, okay, so part of the I want to quickly make something clear, because earlier on you were saying, you know, oh, the Biden thing. I've briefly heard some stuff, but I've been avoiding the news the last 24, 48 hours, specifically because I've just got over my jet lag.
Yep.
And I just wanted a day or two where, because everything, the rolling news in particular, doesn't feel like it's telling me anything new at this point. And if it does, it's such a small nugget of new information that I think, just tell me everything in like 3 days' time when there's actual change. So I specifically have been avoiding it as best I can. I was avoiding social media for a lot of yesterday and a bit of the day before. So in terms of that specifically, I probably need to look it up, and even if I don't, it will probably come into my zeitgeist at some point soon.
But I think, on that, I think part of the problem is people aren't reporting it. I mean, in America, and especially a lot of those mainstream, you know, the ones that went hard on Kavanaugh, aren't reporting this very firmly. So when you said I haven't heard about that, my reaction was like, yeah, that's kind of an expectation. Obviously,
I would have
looking, but
I almost certainly would have, because I would say that my Facebook feed in particular is so militantly left-leaning, and there are, I would say, 20 or 30 people on my Facebook who kind of look out for things to specifically post daily that they're angry about. It's almost like the specific I'm going to be angry crowd. Yeah. So I would have imagined that I would have at least seen something. And to be honest with you, something like that I would have clicked. Because even if it's a clickbait thing, I would have liked to have known, oh, it's a clickbait thing rather than this is what it is. Can
I just say, if people haven't heard it, it's horrific. 1993, a woman, she's done on a podcast, because of course now after the world shut down and Armageddon, every person's got a podcast these days. But no, I'm being sarcastic. It's a significant and serious journalistic podcast in America. And she describes in quite detail how, not to offend people out there, he went with his fingers inside her. It's a really horrific account. And I heard someone, a commentator, say the other day, actually, I want to say a true far left commentator, someone who's basically like, fuck the DNC, you know, these are the ways they've screwed us, comparing them, you know, Trump is accused and makes horrible grab him by the pussy comments. Biden has done it. Trump writes a letter and puts a full page out for the, you know, Central Park 5. Biden helps to bring in laws that actually put, you know, young black men in prison. So it's like, if you actually stop and take a step back, who's worse? Yeah.
This is the odd thing is, and again, we can compare the two countries, but over here if I were to say something like that publicly, people would immediately go after me because Trump is so hated. And Trump is a piece of shit. I don't like him in any way, shape, or form.
Totally.
But what I will say is that you start to get. I'm sure he's done something. I mean, and I know it's a gut feeling, and at the moment, you know, sort of, I think Stormy Daniels, is that the right one? She's come forward about some stuff, but at the moment, nothing's been, again, due process, nothing's been completely proved. And don't get me wrong, there are certain things that probably can't be proved anymore due to the time.
Yeah.
And so there is a flaw in that system at the moment that needs to be resolved. But he strikes me as a sort of, at the moment, what he's doing is he's normalizing some of the things that he sees as normal, to the point where you kind of don't get angry anymore.
Yeah.
Whereas people who are actually doing stuff are not. I don't think he's intelligent enough to do it, by the way. I don't think he's doing it on purpose. I just think he is, in his own mind, the big school bully who can do whatever he wants.
He's either like, I've heard stories of Boris Johnson, how he messes up his hair before he goes on camera.
Yeah.
But part of him is actually kind of playing the buffoon. Trump is either doing that and he's the best in the world at it, or he's an idiot. I lean towards idiot. But if he's not, and I mean, he must have some smarts to do some things in business that have worked. Although, look, you don't need to pile on. I realize, you know, I trust me, I know the flaws in Donald Trump. I've been, you know, following this for a very long time. But he's either a complete buffoon, which is what I tend to lean towards, or he's Boris Johnson times 10 and has just got it so locked down. I mean, one thing you can't argue, he is a master marketer, you know, and that's part of what he's done. He's marketed himself to a sector of society.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I don't feel equipped enough to comment on Trump enough. I can give you my personal opinion, but I don't. There's part of me that, you know, I just don't feel equipped to talk personally about him. But with Boris, he does. He has been caught in interviews explaining how he, you know, ruffles up his hair before he goes on there, and I know that John Oliver did a piece that sort of explained a bit more about the psychology of that in great detail. So I know that's sort of public knowledge now. But what alarms me the most is that it's public knowledge, but it's not affecting him. Like that to me is the scarier thing than anything else in this. And I should look up the Biden thing, because that sounds horrific, and I didn't, you know, I'm sorry that I didn't know that for this interview. So I'm not.
Dude, this is just a chat, and I'm not an interview here. We're just hanging out and chit-chatting.
Well, I tell you what annoys me about. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I tell you what really annoys me about that before, because I didn't want to move on from it. It comes back to that thing we were saying before about why would you lie? Do you know what I mean? Like the more. What was so? I mean, there's a lot of I can't remember who told me this, but they said, if you're gonna lie, keep the details sparse and with no follow-up questions. Because I remember what they were doing now. So I do a show in Edinburgh called Two Truths, One Lie, where basically I get 3 comedians on stage, 2 tell a truth, 1 tell a lie, and the audience have to guess who's who. And they were talking to me about it, because I said I might be doing it again this year. And he said, you should give everyone this bit of advice. And I said, no, fuck them. They can work it out for themselves about how to lie properly. I don't care. And I just think, if you are going to go on record and give what sounds like, from what you're saying, a very detailed account.
Yeah, very detailed.
And to be honest with you, you know, I've not had anything like that on that level. But there's been things in my life, and whenever anything horrific like that's happened, you run through it in your head a lot, and you do remember selected things really specifically. And whenever I hear, you know, she remembers, you know, the color of the carpet or any of these specific details, and they go, well, how could you remember that? But you can't remember that. And you go, well, your memory is fallible, and you do black out certain elements of a memory when it's bad and when it's horrible, and the memory is just a story that you tell yourself to get past it. So
and not to be
yeah,
crass, but maybe her face was pushed into the carpet. Maybe that was why
could
that
be
was
that
so.
as well.
Yeah,
Could be that as well.
yeah.
And maybe
People should look it up. Actually, if I can find how to unlock, I mean, I've just had a paywall put on my blog, and we think that's
right.
the thing to make people sign up to actually get the blog as well, which is not the intention.
Right.
But just look it up, and you'll find the interview. And she talks about, she can't remember various words that were said, but she does remember him saying something like "you're nothing, you're worthless" after the event, after he realized that she wasn't reciprocating. So she remembers one or two very specific words, and she remembers other words are being blurry, because it's that flight, fight, or freeze idea, is that obviously that happens all through us. Part of us runs, and if your brain runs, then you miss these words, because you have to protect yourself. So look, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I don't believe her, but I'll happily say who knows about that story. What I do know is, though, it has to be treated the same as the Kavanaugh accusations. That's all I'm saying. And if it doesn't get treated the same as the Kavanaugh accusations, then I wrote a piece about there's a French philosopher who's saying is you get I mean, it's obviously translated into English, but you get the government you deserve. And the thing America needs to do is be a country that doesn't deserve Trump, because they deserve him at the moment. That's the kind of country they are. So they need to actually change from the ground up and become a country that doesn't deserve him. This is the kind of politics that deserves Trump if they just put it under the carpet. You deserve Trump. And the irony being is, even with this pandemic, that Trump has royally cocked up, and they will be worse than Italy, all signs are pointing towards at the moment. Even under this, he still may win. I mean, maybe coronavirus won't even get him out. But if it does, it's going to be fucking close. To sit there and think that the most unlikable, or second most, I think Hillary was the most unlikable in the ratings, the second most unlikable candidate in the history of American politics might get pipped at the post because he cocked up a pandemic and tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Americans died. That's a pretty low bar to go, so wasn't Joe the right choice? America, you're fucked. I'm glad I live here.
Do you know what? What's amazing? I had a chat with a music. I don't know if you have. I don't know if you know him over there. It's called Frank Turner. He's quite a big musician over here.
Right.
And he was quite political before with a band that he was in before he went solo, called oh God, I forgot what they're called. Million Dead. I think they're called Million Dead.
Right.
And I was never a fan of that band. I'm a big fan of him now, and we've sort of crossed paths a few times. And he said the same thing that you just said there, which when I remember when he said it to me, it really opened my mind up, because it made me question politics in a different way. Where I do believe that you get the politicians that you deserve as a society, and it doesn't matter that they don't align with you personally, because you're part of the society. And if you haven't been able to articulate your ethos or your politics or your viewpoint strongly enough or well enough to enough other people to join you to vote the way you would, then you are part of it, as far as I'm concerned. I blame the left more than I blame the right for Boris getting back in, to be honest with you. So yeah,
but that's the same as Trump. I mean, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Hillary Clinton and her campaign, the DNC making it difficult for Bernie last time around. I hold them more. I mean, I'm not American, and in fact, other than the oft used saying that when America sneezes, the world catches a cold, maybe that's not the best saying to use at the moment. In general, American politics doesn't affect my day-to-day life, but I find it interesting and fascinating. It's a soap opera. I mean, not meaning to minimize the seriousness of it, but it's basically a soap opera. But that, so when I say I blame the left, it's actually, I don't vote over there. I'm not part of their election cycle, but I think that the left is more at fault as to why Trump is in than a better candidate, because the left got behind the worst candidate. You imagine how bad you have to be, how hated you have to have fucking Donald Trump beat you. How bad do you have to be as a candidate, and how wrong? And the problem is, what they're doing now, getting behind Joe Biden, is it's Clinton light. I mean, he's got all the same track record. He's got all the same or a version of, things like his son. I know people are saying Hunter Biden don't judge the man on the sun, but it's Trump is a genius at throwing mud and having it stick. That's what he does well. And you know what? This son of his, it's nepotism. There's no question about that. And Trump's going to be able to pull out again and say, well, I'm rich and I'm this, and I'm not going to. And although he's routing the system, he's going to be able to sell the narrative. I don't need this job. My family's not going to benefit from it. All bullshit. But he'll be able to sell that story. And Biden is Clinton light, not as good, not as vicious, and may still lose to Trump should he be the nominee, even though the coronavirus has come through. It's just unbelievable.
The weird thing for me is, I mean, I don't even think it's about backing the wrong candidate. I think it's just the way the left treated Trump and the way that they acted morally superior. I think as soon as you chuck your morals into politics, you turn off the other side to even hearing your point of view. And the way that these people, sort of act like, oh, well, you're the right, I'm the wrong. You can't put your morals into it because, or at least you can't at the start, because the minute your morals are the thing you're fighting on, the minute you have to be right and the other person has to be wrong in order for you to be having a debate, which means that no one wants to be told they're wrong. Nobody wants to start with, you're immoral and wrong, and here's why. So I don't know. I don't think it's about backing them. They could have backed any other candidate. If they continue to treat Trump and the people that supported Trump in the same way, regardless, that's what causes what you get there. And again, they deserve every bit of it they get.
And well, not to labour the point, which is probably too late because I'm about 12 months into Labour from the sounds of it now, is that because they did go down that moralistic path, they're now stuck in the path. And so if they ignore the Biden thing, that's actually going to give Trump the opportunity to go, we'll see, same old politics, different day, same old outcome, different person. These guys are doing the same old. I'm not a political candidate. I'm not into politics. I've only been in politics for 4 years. And look at me. I won once, giving it once ago. I won. I'm the best. So they played the moralistic card. So if they don't continue that moralistic card, with Biden, that's the country that deserves Trump.
No, completely.
I want to know, because you and me were in quite a lot of contact over the net when you were sort of in this neck of the woods, but even I got lost with your movements. I'd really like to know what happened, because you're one of these people that had to basically fight to get back home. First, I've got a question for you though. Are you happy now you went home? Was it the right decision?
It couldn't have been timed better in hindsight.
Good. All right. So tell me what happened. You and I were talking, I think, when you were still in Australia, and it was just about when the 14-day lockdown happened. So if you had have come to New Zealand, you would have missed a couple of your gigs or something. So give us the story from when the change, I guess, happened in New Zealand for the 14-day lockdown, and then how you actually got home. I'd really like to understand it.
I'm just opening my calendar because I want to get this right. Okay. Because I've been because it's so frustratingly when you sit down and think about a time in your life and it literally feels like ages ago, but it's like a week ago. That's what it feels like right now.
Like when I used to be able to go down the road.
Yeah, exactly. When outside was an option,
wasn't it?
Oh God, I miss outside. I still haven't been out. I've had my 7-day quarantine. I've shown no symptoms, and I was meant to walk to the post office today to put in a load of refund requests for because for some reason my credit card wants them written down. I haven't even done that. I've printed it and it's all ready to go, but for some reason anyway. So bit of context. I've never been to Australia or New Zealand before. Right. And it was one of those weird sort of, like you said, my Edinburgh Fringe run went phenomenally better than normal, and that resulted in a lot of festivals and venues getting behind me and helping me get out there. I'd been out, I came out on the 31st of Jan, so it wasn't a thing then. Like genuinely, I said to my dad last night, do you remember when I left and your biggest worry was the bushfires? Like, how good were those days? Like, do you not miss those
When
days?
Australia was on fire.
Yeah, I miss that being my biggest worry, that my venue might burn down. And he was like, "Oh, that's not funny." And I went, "It's fucking funny." Anyway, so I arrived on like the 2nd, and I was in Perth, and I did my run in Perth, and everything was fine. The world had not really, as in the world of Australia, had not really acknowledged coronavirus at this point. At home, on the other hand, everything was starting to get a bit weird and freaky. Everyone was starting to talk about it like it's not just flu, but the government was not doing anything.
Right.
I then flew from Perth to Adelaide,
Okay.
and again, that run was going fine. If anything, they cared even less
So,
about
and
coronavirus.
you were doing shows in Australia at the time. You were performing.
Yeah, yeah. So my first show was, looking at the calendar, 10th of Feb. And I sort of had a week before to do a bit of promotion and stuff. And I was doing gigs that week essentially to promote the show. And I flew on the 17th to Adelaide, and I started on the 18th. And again, just everyone I met, there was no conversation about coronavirus. Like, nobody mentioned it. Everyone was just talking about sales figures. Have you seen the show? All the usual stuff you'd hear in festivals. And then I flew to Auckland in your fair country on, when was it? The 2nd of March. Now, at this point, Australia started to care, but it wasn't really a big deal.
Had we locked down by then? Had we done the 14-day by then?
No.
Okay, so you got into New Zealand and you could have just continued through it if you wanted to. You weren't in quarantine. All right.
Yeah. So I arrived on the 2nd, and they did the lockdown. I remember it distinctly because I remember what I was doing that day. They did the lockdown on the 13th or 14th of March. So about 2 weeks after I got there. I know that because my girlfriend was meant to be flying that day, and she and I were talking about it because she was like, "Well, we can't fly now," because long story short, her dad was working with someone who showed some symptoms, and so they wouldn't let him get on the plane because they were flying to Mexico, and Mexico were taking it really seriously at this point. So they were like, if you work with anyone who got symptoms, you're not coming in. Doesn't matter that your country won't let you get on the plane. You won't be allowed off at ours. So anyway, so at that point, I was starting to get emails from the festival going, "Just so you know, if you're not already in the country, don't fly here because we won't let you perform, blah, blah, blah. Or you need to be 2 weeks and it will be after that and whatever." But I'm here, so I'm carrying on gigging. I'm in Rotorua at that point, so I'm going look at all the hot springs and smelling like eggs and all that sort of stuff.
Nice.
And I drive down to Wellington, and I do my first night at the festival to a really nice crowd. But just before that, like maybe 2 hours, 3 hours before, I start getting emails from Dunedin going, the country's locking down. They're lowering the number of people that we can have in a room. I actually got an email. It was on the 2nd day from Prague Fringe, which was the one I'm meant to be doing in a couple of weeks' time, but it's been cancelled.
Right.
Where they literally sent me the email. We've now been locked down, and we're not allowed to have any events with more than 500 people in at any one time. Your venue is 80 seats, so you'll be fine. And I was like,
I think I saw that Facebook post.
I know. I was like, good to know that my lack of commercial viability is really working in my favor right now. So I did the first. So I arrived at the venue, and it's me and Stephanie Lang, who's a good friend of mine. We're the two shows. She's on first, I'm on after, and that's the whole running order for that night at the Cabin Club.
So this is Wellington still?
Wellington, yeah.
Okay, yep.
And me and her met up about an hour before her show, and we were chatting away about, what do we do? Like, what are we doing here? What's happening? Where do we go? Do we carry on? I don't know. The next day I get an email from the Fringe basically saying, we're locking down, we're not letting people in, blah, 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 blah. So my hosts there are very kindly put me in touch with a whatchamacallit, travel agent.
Right.
Because I've made the decision at this point to go home after my final show, but not to tell Gareth at the Dunedin Fringe. I wanted to wait another day or so because I had a very strong feeling he was going to cancel it. And if I cancelled it, potentially I would not be allowed to get the refund. Whereas if they cancel it, it's their, the money, you get the money back.
Okay.
So I book a ticket for Monday, the 23rd. So 5 days away. And I'm going to go with maybe 4 hours later, the country goes into lockdown and basically says, we're after the 1st of April, you're not going to there's no external flights, you're not allowed to come in, all the shit that hit the fan.
Yep.
And I get an email from the travel agent saying, you booked this flight at the exact right moment.
Yeah, wow.
Like you could not have had more luck in this if you tried, because literally I got up late that day and I went to the travel agent and I was there and this was an interesting thing. The night before, I was trying to find somewhere to park because Wellington is not the home of parking, and I bumped into a couple who I asked, can I park here? Because it seems like it's out of hours, but I don't know your parking meter things. Sure. And they were, well, we just sold our car, so we don't have any use for the car parking space on our drive. Just park there. And I went, really? And they went, yeah, just park on our drive.
Welcome to New Zealand, parking.
I know. I was like, wow. And they went, yeah, literally, we just sold it. And I was like, okay, fine. I said, I'm only going to be here till the end of the week, so it won't be a big deal. And they went, as long as you need, don't worry about it. So I drove in, parked my car. It was about a 30-minute walk from there to get to there, but it's better than paying the parking. So I walked to the travel agent and I booked it at about midday, and it all kicks off a few hours later. So timing, looking back, I'm like, Jesus, this is serendipitous film level, chance. And all of a sudden, all my friends are like, I've got a flight in 2 weeks' time. I've got a flight in 3 weeks' time. Am I going to be able to get home? And I'm like, I would go and talk to someone and get this changed because I don't think you're going to get home. So that evening, me and Steph do our shows. She's a bit worried about it. I'm like, well, I can't really, what we're going to do. I come out of my show about 9:30 and I get a message from her that just says my flight's been cancelled. Wow. And her flight is the day after mine. It's like the Tuesday, it's the 24th. So I'm thinking, fuck, I'm not going to get home. I get up the next morning on the 19th and I get an email from the Fringe that basically says, we recommend you cancel your shows. And if you want to do the rest of your run, please give us a call on this number to validate why you would like to do the rest of the shows. Basically saying, if you don't cancel, we really need a fucking good reason for why you're going to carry on and put people's lives at risk and all this sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Which is a perfectly reasonable way of dealing with it. But equally, it was a little bit like, just cancel the festival. Just at that point, you've sort of made your own decision. So I cancelled my run, but I was allowed to keep the Wednesday show. Because it was a long story, I can't remember the exact reasoning, but they basically said, do Wednesday, just cancel Friday. Thursday, cancel Friday and Saturday. Steph did the same, independent of me. And we sort of decided together that it would probably be a good idea. She had to pull her show in the end because no one turned up to it on the Thursday. And I had, I think, that half room, which was quite nice given the situation, because before we started, I sort of went, well, you can sit there, there's a gap there, you there, and we basically made sure there was a chair in between everyone because we could, which is really fun as a thing to do in the show. And then afterwards, everyone was saying goodbye and we were doing this elbow, the elbow shake and stuff. And I sent Steph a message and just said, where are you? And we met up because she was doing a show. And I said, I've made a decision. I'm going to go to the airport tomorrow morning. Are you in? And she said, no, I'll call the airline in a couple of days and talk to them, because she was on Virgin and they said they're going to put her on another flight, but not to call unless you are within 48 hours of your flight because they can't deal with the volume of calls.
Yeah, of course.
And I said, fuck that, come to the airport. And she said, no, it'll all be fine. It wasn't fine for her, but we'll get to that in a minute. Sorry if this story is quite long.
No, I want to hear it.
So in the morning I got up. I had all my stuff packed the night before. Here was the problem. I could get from Wellington to Auckland, no problem. But when I get to, because that was Air New Zealand and that was an internal flight.
Right.
But to get out the country, I had no promises that I could get on that flight. So I knew that once I was in Auckland, I was either completely fucked or I was on my way home. But I thought it was worth doing because my mum had at that point been put on the high risk list, and she was told not to go out the house. She was worried about me not being home, blah 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 blah. So I was in a hotel at this point as well. So just for a bit more context, the people I was staying with, one of them was working in an office of 700 people, and one of them showed signs of the coronavirus. Right. So my partner moved me out of there and put me in a hotel because she was like, I don't care that you're hemorrhaging money. I want you out of that house. I don't want you anywhere near it, because she'd been dealing with the panic over here.
Yeah.
And I said, I think I'll be fine. I'm only going to be here too much. She went, no, get out. So I got up in the morning, I explained to the hotel front desk, and I said, I'm going to give you my key, and I'm going to go and walk to my car, and then I'm going to drive to the airport, and I'm going to ask the car people if they'll do the same thing as you, which is essentially, can you look after the key? If I need to come back and I can't get the flight to Auckland, I will have to stay here tonight. So can you just leave me? Can you not check me out, but can I call you if I get on the plane? And they said, fine. And so did the car hire place. So I drive to the airport, and I queue up for probably 2 hours. I get to the front desk, and the woman goes, well, we can't move your flight. You'd either have to buy a new one or whatever. And I was like, well, I'm not buying another flight. I don't need any more flights. Thank you very much. Can you just move it? Eventually she moved it. I flew to Auckland, and I arrived about, I'm going to say 1. And I went straight, literally walked to the international desk for Emirates, which was closed. And so then I asked around at security, I was like, where can I talk to someone from Emirates? And they said, you could go to the lounge area, because they have like a business lounge. That's closed because they don't want people in there because coronavirus.
Wow.
So I'm now in an airport. There's no one there from the company. There's no desk open because the flight leaves at 9:45. So I've got nothing. I can't do anything. And I didn't want to leave because I just thought if I leave, if someone turns up, I lost my opportunity to talk to them. Sure. So I went and got food, and then I just stood there listening to podcasts for what was literally half a day, just waiting. I remember I was walking up and down my bags because I was trying to get some exercise and stop myself from going mad. I eventually walked all the way to the one end of the desk and walked all the way back. And this was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And by the time I got back, there was a huge queue for desks that hadn't got anything up on the, on the wall bit. Like it has like the name of the airline or whatever. Yeah. And I said, oh, what are you all queuing for? And they said, oh, Emirates flight, whatever. And I went, okay. And so I joined it based on nothing else. And I'm standing there in this queue trying to keep away from people because no one at this point has been given like specific guidance of how far to stand apart. Mm-hmm. Just waiting to get to the front. And these Emirates staff come along who clearly aren't going to be able to help because they're sort of just the people that stand at the front of the queue telling you where to go. Yeah. Who get out signs that just say, here's online check-in, here's business class, here's whatever. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm just going to go to whichever queue's the shortest because to me it doesn't matter because I don't have a thing. I get to the front after possibly a 90-minute queue. So this is now 6:30, 7 o'clock. And by the way, clearly they've emailed people to get there earlier to do extra security because there was extra security there than normal. And people were queuing at 5 for a 9 p.m., 9:45 flight. So, they must have known, let's get out of here. I get to the front and I explain to the woman the situation and she goes, we can only change this over the phone. And I said, well, I've rung up and they couldn't change it. And she says, I don't change flights. And I go, who does? And they go, the online people. So I asked to speak to a manager and she walks me over to a manager and I'm in a queue of 3 other people to get a flight. I talk to the woman and the woman says, I can try, but there's no guarantee we can do this or whether we'll even be able to fit you on it because this is a sold out flight. Mm-hmm. And I go, try. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I've been standing here for 9 hours now. I'm happy to wait another 20 minutes. Wow. The woman in front of me starts crying. She's also trying to get on the flight. And I noticed that the manager gets very more serious with her request to get on the flight. And I see her walk her to the front of the queue. There's still a queue, by the way, of like people getting on, but she walks to the front and she puts her on the flight. And she goes through. I assume because someone cancelled a seat, but I don't know that for sure. So I start crying. because I texted my girlfriend and I said, I think crying's the way forward. I think that's the only way I'm going to get on the plane. And she texted me back something like, I think it's different for women. And I said, well, I've got nothing to lose at this point. I'm quite sad as it is. I'll push myself to cry. And frankly, thankfully, I'm not a good actor, but I can cry fairly on cue. So I start crying and saying to her, I need to get home. I need to get home. And she takes my request more seriously.
Wow.
And so but here's the thing. She said, unfortunately, that is the seat. That's the seat gone. So we're going to have to wait here, and I'll see if I can get you on it. And then she comes back and says, we can't currently get you on this flight. What we're trying to do is sort out the second flight on the basis that we might be able to get you on this flight, because my stopover was Dubai, and Dubai is currently the only stopover place that's allowing people to stop to refuel to get to the next place. And they're worried that people are going to get to Dubai and stay in Dubai, and they don't want loads of new people staying there because of the virus. So she sorts out my second flight first. I now have a flight. My second flight is now today, and my first flight is now Monday. So I need this flight because otherwise I have nothing. I'm going to get to Dubai and they're not going to let me stay. So I'm standing there.
That would mean possibly you can get on a plane and go all the way back to New Zealand, eh?
Yeah, I would have to. Dubai. They would send me home because Dubai would not. Dubai have no. They don't care. Like, I'm not their responsibility. New Zealand
send you back to the origins of the flight.
Rather than the flight of where.
So you could have flown to Dubai, then flown all the way back to New Zealand, basically.
Yeah, basically.
Whoa.
That would have been the situation, because I said, what if I got there and I called the embassy, and they said, well, the embassy wouldn't be able to do anything because they wouldn't have a seat for you on a flight. And at the moment you need to be reserved on flight seats because they're all filling up. So you could ring them, but unless you want to try and convince them to get you a private jet somewhere home, it's not going to happen because they don't have any seats. So what are they going to do?
Boris, could you send
exactly.
I know you've got coronavirus at the moment, but maybe we could borrow your flights.
Yeah. Have you got some space while I'm still not sick? So it gets to, I can't remember exact timings, but it's something like 8:10, right? And I know that's a really specific time to not know, but I remember it had passed 8:00 because the woman behind me, who was in the queue, she said, my limit is 8, because if I haven't heard anything from 8, I'm pretty certain I'm going to get on it, and she'd gone. But it was shortly after that. And I remember going through security and getting a text from my partner asking what was happening at 8:30. So I know it was before then. So I'm going to go with 8:10.
Oh, fair enough.
The woman comes over and says, come over here, please. Could you put your bag on the counter? And I went, yeah, sure. So I put my bag on there. She tags it up. She goes, we're going to put you through fast track security, which means there's less security for you than anyone else getting on this plane.
So that means you got your switchblade through, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. I got all my my fruit and veg that you guys wouldn't let me. There you go. They said basically the flight leaves in just over an hour, and you need to get through the entire terminal because it's like at the other end or whatever, and security. So run. And I was like, what? And she literally just went run and pointed me in the direction of the terminal. And I just went, thank you. She went run and just told me to go. She was literally angry at me that I was staying thanking her, because she was like, you haven't got time for this, go. So I don't know how familiar you are with Auckland terminals, but you go up the escalator, you go through the security bit. I started going through the normal security bit because I wasn't thinking straight. And this woman pulled me to one side and just went, where are you going? Because I was flustered and I was running, and you're not meant to run through security. So she was obviously like wondering what the fuck I'm doing. And I said, I've just got this flight I need to go through. And on it had like a stamp that said fast track. And she went, no, come through here. And I'm looking at this huge queue of people that are in front of me that, doing that zigzaggy thing. And they're all just like waiting there. And she goes, no, through here. And she takes my bag, and they don't take my laptop out. There's no, any of this like unpacking shit or taking off your belt. It just went straight. Honestly, if you can get on the fast track, it's fucking amazing.
And all you needed was a pandemic. So it's great.
Yeah, exactly. So I went through, and they did the laser thing that checks your temperature at the top of your head. And they said, you cleared, go. And I literally started running, and no one stopped me at this point, because everyone, I assumed at this point in security, knew that why I'm running. It's not like I'm just trying to nick or press my love to anyone. I'm just running. So I run through all the, duty free bits, all the shops, everything. I'm looking around. I'm trying to find the gate, the terminal. I arrive and nobody's boarded at this point. Like literally there's just everyone sitting around. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm sweaty. This is agony. I don't like this. And I'm talking to people and they're just like, they're not boarding at the moment. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And they were like, yeah, no, there's a problem. There's no boarding. And I'm just sitting there getting angry going, I've just run this. And I've spent, when you're just tetchy and you're just like, what the fuck am I going to do? And so I'm sat there next to a Korean family and a mum who was just holding her baby, who were just panicking, and I'm like, this is not helping me be zen right now. Like it's the only chair free because you know what it's like when you're at the it's a small area and there's only one seat, so I just sat in the one place that no one was sitting. I assume they'd left that free in hindsight to have some space with the virus.
Social distancing.
Yeah, exactly. But at the time, social distancing wasn't really a problem. Everyone was just, it was sort of like stay apart, but there's no specific amount.
Right.
So I sat there and I'm just panicking and like they're panicking, it's not going well. And all of a sudden there's an announcement that just says, hi, we're going to board these rows. And I'm sat there going, that's not my row. But I breathed a sigh of relief to the fact that we're actually boarding. Mm-hmm. And so I sent my partner a message and I just said to her, we're getting on. I will send you a message when I get to Dubai, so you know that I'm fine because I've got a long layover in Dubai. It's like 8-9 hours.
Right.
But just so you know, I'm going to be out of it for the next 19 hours. Please let my family know that I'm coming home, blah, 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 blah. I take a melatonin at this point because I wanted to sleep the flight.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to get drowsy. My row is the last one to get, or I'm the last person to get called, which seemed odd because when I looked at the seat, so we'll get to this in a minute, but my seat was essentially the worst seat I think you could possibly have. It was back corner of the middle compartment.
Right.
So it was clear that someone had cancelled and I just got whatever seat was available. And I thought that's a really weird one to bring in last because you think you'd want to fill up from the outside and in, but I assume it's because I was the last person to get checked in and so that maybe they didn't have whatever. And so I'm the last one to get on the plane. Now I am, as a habitual flyer, I like to be the last person on the plane anyway, because I like to have a look around and see if there's a spare seat somewhere else that I can just sit in and no one can know. And I get on and I'm walking through and I see the front row where the extra legroom is empty.
Wow. And
I in my head, my brain just went, sit in it. And I was like, what if I get caught? What if I get moved? I don't want to get thrown off this flight. I can't get thrown off this flight. And my brain just went, sit. And I was like, are you sure? And it was like, just sit. And I sat down on the end of the row, right? And the woman just comes past and I thought she was going to get me to move. And she went, no, can you just put your bag up there? And I went, yeah, fine, take my bag, put it above, fine. And the guy 2 rows behind was like, oh, the table isn't working or something. Can I move to another seat? And they went, if there's a spare one when we move, you can sit wherever you like. And she says, oh, there's a couple here at the front, but we don't know if they're going to be filled by the end. So just, wait a minute, whatever. And so she's sort of, I assuming I'm there and there's no problem. And we take off and no one questions it. Wow. And I just thought, well, I'm going to be the most polite, British, quiet member of this. I mean, it was actually not as good as it sounds because extra legroom doesn't necessarily mean you have any extra room to lay down. And because he came at the side of the front, I had one extra seat and they have the armrests. This makes me sound like such a first world problem, but the armrest bits you can't put down at the front row of those ones. Yeah. So you have to sit standing up. But I did, after about, I don't know, 9 hours of sleep, go and have a look at what my chair was going to be, essentially, because no one was sat in it. I sort of knew what number I was at. And I walked back. It was a back corner one where the person in front of me had moved their chair. Like it was just, they were just camped out like that. And the guy next to where I was going to be sitting was just a really big guy. And so I was like, I would have just been cramped in this thing. And I was just like, I am so lucky that I got on last, that I was there, that the time, just every part of this was amazing. And yeah, and then I got to Dubai, and the rest of the journey was fine.
So I would assume you've worked this out, because I know it's the kind of thing I do. From leaving that hotel where you got them to hold on to your key, to walking in your front door, what was the time? What was the time of travel?
As in England?
Yeah.
Something like 39 hours.
Wow, day and a half.
Yeah, 39, 40 hours, something like
With
that.
like 9 hours in Auckland Airport and 9 hours in Dubai.
Oh, I didn't count the. Oh, sorry, no, it'd be longer than that. I didn't. Sorry, I was counting from when I got on the plane in Auckland. Okay, yeah, no,
Oh,
sorry, you said door to door. Yes, it probably more than that because it was yeah, it was 18, 19 hours to Dubai, 9 hour layover in Dubai.
just
I think
27,
it was
28.
I think it was 12 hours. Yeah, something like 11, 12 hours to England,
So
and
that's
then I had an
40.
hour
So
and a
that's
half.
40 once you leave Auckland, and then a good 9 hours in Auckland plus the flight up. So you're looking at 50 to 55 hours travel.
Yeah, because it was a 90-minute drive home.
Yeah.
From the airport, and then the drive to the airport was something like an hour and a half because I had to drive from. I had to walk from the. I had to walk from the. I can give you the address if you want to work it out properly, but
No. I just started trying to think about that's your. It's like I've just watched the three Lord of the Rings with my kids, and so I've got. It's like the epic journey. It's like sounds like you were
yeah,
looking between 50 and 60 hours of travel time to get home,
yeah,
and everything lined up. Although there were a few delays, and you made it.
yeah. So my Mount Victoria was where I could park my car.
Yep.
And my hotel was literally on the other side. I cannot remember the area, but it was like a 35-minute walk. So I had to walk 35 minutes to get the car and then drive back, which took about 15 minutes, then get my case and then drive, because obviously Mount Victoria is nearer the airport to where my hotel was.
Yep.
So I had to drive back the other way. So all of that probably took an hour and a half, maybe just under 2 hours anyway. And then queuing in the airport was like 90 minutes before. And that's in Wellington, let alone getting to. So yeah, it was probably 45, 50 hours.
So and best decision you made. It sounds like what you're saying.
Yeah, well, because when I got on the plane, when I got off the plane in Dubai, my phone blew up, and not in a bad way for a flight.
Not a Samsung way.
Not a Samsung way. Well, it is a Samsung. I logged into their Wi-Fi because I don't have roaming there, and all of the people I left were messaging me, as well as new people, because I'd been posting about this. I'm getting on my plane finally.
Yep.
And this wasn't just New Zealand people that were out here. I mean, one friend of mine, Gary, he'd flown down to Dunedin and arrived the day before, and between getting on the plane and arriving, the festival had been pulled.
Wow.
So you know how short that flight is. It's like an hour and a half or whatever.
Yep.
And he got off and he got the email and he sent me a message and just went, don't know what to do now, because there's been I think it was Christchurch was the place where you've had your first, that was the nearest coronavirus that made them stop.
We had the first 10 we didn't have in the South Island. It was like took to like number 7 or 8 to get to the South Island. It was all the North Island, but now it's I don't know, 450 or something. It's up to now.
Yeah. So he messaged me and was like, "How did you get home?" And I said, "Cry, just cry, because if you do it on the phone, people can reject you very easily. If you do it in person." And like I said to her, this was before I was crying at this point. I said to her, "I have flown here from Wellington. You can see I can show you the boarding pass now. I have nowhere to stay. I have to go home today. It's just not a question." And she said, "Well, we only got one flight because they've cancelled about the flights. So it had to be that flight. Every element of it was so lucky. I was very fortunate. And also I got home and my mum's very good friend, her son came out there 2 weeks before I left. So he came out there probably early March, as in Australia. Right. And he was an idiot. He was coming out because he was like, well, I planned this trip and I didn't want to cancel it and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you're a fucking moron. Why the hell would you? Anyway, she said, will you talk to him? Will you help him get home? I'm like, I don't own an airport or an airline. Like, I have no, there's no part of me that can help with this other than telling him that coming home is a good idea.
But you do have that's good, obviously good instincts and good nous just to go and get going. I mean, and also the patience. If I think about sitting around for 9 hours or queuing for 3 hours, those are the things that obviously have worked in your favor because it got you what you wanted in the long run. And also the sitting in that front row, genius. Just know. I wonder as well. I sometimes wonder about the universe and kind of paying backs and paying forwards and. This must have financially hit you really hard. So a couple of nice little, light as in to light up along the way must be are well deserved. An odd little rainbow amongst all this darkness, whether it's financially or whether it's your lack of the trip being cancelled or whatever. You got to have some wins on the way as well.
Yeah, I mean, so I think you can say that. I don't know if I would say I had a good instinct. I think I should have left a few days earlier, if I'm completely honest with you.
Really?
I think I got very lucky, and I can't honestly say that my instincts were the best.
Well, they're better than many.
Huh?
Better than many. I mean, if you started organising that stuff just like literally just before, that's better than many. I mean, like, depending on whether it's, a supermarket shop. Like, I'm dumbfounded that I haven't been to the supermarket. I've been isolated. This is my 5th day. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday in isolation, I guess technically since Tuesday night, and today's Sunday. So this is my 5th day. I'm dumbfounded that I'm seeing people posting signs about going to, our supermarket here is Pack and Save, going to Pack and Save, and the queues are out the door and around the corner. Like, what the fuck were you people doing? And I'm not talking about hoarding or about panic buying, but what were you people doing with the 3 or 4 days? We got a 48 hours notice. What were you people doing? At least not even having enough food for the first week. I mean, we've only been locked down for 4 days. I don't get it. I mean, it might sound a bit judgy and stuff and a bit harsh, but it's like, okay, so the second week you need to go out and replenish. Understandable. But day 3, well, what's going on?
Yeah. Oh no, totally. I think what's really odd to me is, the people that are, the people that are going to the shops every day. I mean, my mum was for a bit, and I had to go to it. Look, you being a moron in the nicest way possible. Like, you just go and buy a big shop. So go and buy a big shop. Stay in. That's all you got to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, I stayed up last night till midnight to get a delivery slot because all of them were full, and they refill them. I know because I used to do coding in another life, and I know that you would do that at either midnight or 1 a.m. because you'd either do it at midnight because it's the turn of the day, or you do it at 1 a.m. because that way people couldn't complain that their clock said midnight or whatever, and it also throws off a lot more people that don't wait up that extra hour. So I waited up till midnight, and I thought I'm not going to wait up till 1 because I can't be asked, and I was too tired.
Yeah.
And I got a slot, and it's on the 17th of April at 9 till 10 p.m. depending what time they can come, and that was the one slot I could get that day. So the fact that we are on what is today, the 28th of March, and the closest I could get it was 18 days, shows just the level to which the demand's there, but also just fucking be prepared. How are people not more prepared? I don't know. I know we both sound really judgy now, but there's part of me that goes in the nice way. Unless you are someone who is literally living paycheck to paycheck, you've lost your job, and so you didn't have the money to go out and buy food, then I'll go, you know what, that's fine. But the number of people that are doing it can't be all of them. It just can't.
But I'm not even talking about stocking up for a couple of weeks. I mean, most people, I would think, would be able to shop for the week. So to be in the supermarkets the day after we go into lockdown, or 2 days after, that's what I'm not quite understanding. I mean, obviously there are circumstances which come up. Maybe there's a baby in the house. Maybe there's this. Maybe, as you say, maybe they didn't get paid until Thursday, so they had to wait. Fair enough, but it just looks like what we're not having here, which I'm seeing in parts of the world. Like, I've seen footage from the UK where people are being shooed out of parks. That's just not a holiday. Get to your house. We're not really having that so much here. Although was it 300? I did see a report last night where there was, I'll say a significant amount. I don't want to misquote it. It was either 30 or 300 surfers at a local beach. I was quite surprised when I heard the shutdown was coming. I was thinking to myself, if we get cabin fever, we can jump in the car and go for a drive. We're not going to interact with anyone. We're just going to, cruise up north and have a look at the beaches, and maybe even take a picnic lunch and sit out on the grass away from everybody. But then the morning of, there was a report from the head of police here going, don't even think about going for a drive to the beach. Yeah. Don't even think about going for a drive to the park. And I'm like, crumbs. And what I think I've realized now, and I'm thinking what it is because if everybody does that, then you end up with 300 surfers at the beach. So what the message in New Zealand is stay in your community. And also, therefore, if there's an outbreak, it's restricted to your community. So we can walk down the road to the park, but they don't want us driving down the road to the park, because if you're driving down the road to the park, then, oh, let's just go to the next park. Oh, how's the water looking these days? I missed the view, you know. So I think it's more basically the government saying, we can't trust you pricks.
Yeah.
So just stay out of your cars.
But I don't want to, you know, this is not a comment on New Zealanders in general at all, but I'm just saying, the government can't trust us because here's the thing, we get bored and we're only people, and you even said it yourself. You're like, well, it's gonna go. We can't do that. It's just not something we're meant to be doing right now. And all of the I mean, here's the thing. You know, they don't know what it is yet. Really, they know like some of it, but they don't understand it enough. So all they know is it will latch into your lungs. It will decay your lungs, because that's what it does. It essentially changes the fabric of the lining of your lungs, which means that you can't breathe. And that's why people are having those heavy, chesty, empty coughs.
Mm-hmm.
And if it carries on like that, it will deplete your immune system, because as your immune system attacks it, it starts to attack itself. And then anything else that comes your way. It's the reason why they're saying those pre-existing conditions are the killer, really, rather than the actual disease. Because if it drains you, it's like having a friend that just drains all your energy. If all of a sudden someone comes along that you really like, who, like, you know, has all that energy on top of it, it would just kill you. You'd just be like, I can't deal with it anymore, and your body just clamps out. So it's why, you know. I don't know this fully, but from what they're saying to me, it feels like the disease itself isn't actually killing people. It's the fact that you have something else that can't now be dealt with because your immune system has been so depleted.
It's a bit like when people with people with HIV, they die of pneumonia. So it's the problem from the other thing that kicks in. Yeah, so that's why the elderly are so at risk at the moment. I was going to say as well, you know, and obviously this is from the motherland. We have Queen's birthday honours, you know, every October. Is it October? I think it's October. And there was a story about a Dunedin rest home, and it brought a tear to the eye, because what 9 of the workers have done is moved into the rest home. So they've left their families, and one of the women was quite teary, talking about her 11-year-old, her 12-year-old, and her 18-year-old sons that she's left at home. And they've moved into the rest home during this 4 weeks. So then the bubble is the rest home and the workers, and no one has to worry about things. And I just thought, you know, this Queen's birthday honour, those are the kinds of people that I want to see honoured on it. You know, someone that gives up a month of their life to look after these elderly, vulnerable people, literally giving it up, living in the place. I just hope that at the end of this whole thing, you know, assuming it's going to end, I mean, it is on this level. But, you know, I mean, not that it's the same, but SARS and bird flu and H1N1 and Ebola and all those things ran a cycle, and then they were sort of done. And I just hope those are the kinds of people that get the recognition at the end of this whole thing. And the doctors and the nurses. They did a podcast a week and a half ago with actually a professor from the university who specializes in infectious diseases. And during that, we brought up some of the pictures of some of the Italian nurses. And Italian nurses with bruises all around here because they've been wearing the face masks while looking after people. So I just hope they're the people that at the end of this, they're getting all the recognition.
I don't think they will, but I think they should as well. I've lived too many things to know that the people who deserve the most credit don't get it, and it does frustrate me that people are you know, that, I mean, you know, we did this thing the other night where we at 8 o'clock the other night, everyone, well, meant to be everyone, clapped for the NHS. I don't know if you saw that,
including Boris outside number 10. I saw that.
Yeah, probably spreading his now corona. But and what was really funny about that for me was, you know, as much as it was meant with amazing positivity, and it was designed to be, you know, a good thing. The amount, there was an NHS hashtag, I cannot remember what it was specifically, that was going around saying, just stay in your fucking house. Like, you don't have to clap for us. Just fund the NHS and stop clapping. We don't give a shit about you clapping right now. Like, if you want to clap us at the end and do like a proper like 5-hour clap-a-thon, absolutely fine. It was amazing. It was just all these nurses and doctors who are like, I've just got off a 19-hour shift. The clapping is nice, but fucking stay indoors. And it's one of those things where, I think it was a good thing. I think it was a bad time to do the good thing because I think it did more for us than it did for them necessarily. But like you said, at the end of it, I hope they get more credit than they're going to get, and I hope the positive things that have helped the country, that the government have managed to miraculously put through, that they said weren't possible. Stay.
Well, that's like in America. I heard whatever it was, the $1 trillion, surplus, whatever it's called, the bill that they're putting through to help. One of the senators said, well, that's $6,000 for every man, woman, and child in America. Why don't we give the family of five just $30,000 rather than adding the stimulus to the businesses? Why don't we give that $30,000 straight to the family of five? They're going to spend it in those businesses anyway. It's the same argument as when the world economy crashed and they propped up the banks rather than giving the money to the people to pay their mortgages, which would have propped up the banks.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see what happens. I'm really quite proud of what we've done in New Zealand. I'm really quite proud of Jacinda's leadership. And I mean, not that this is the time to talk about this, but I think we've got an election this year. I think Labour will romp in, especially if these impacts will positively impact the cycle that we've got here of what's going on. But yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic that we've got ahead of it. I can't remember which country it was, but it had 21,000 cases, and based on the population, it would have equated to about 1,000 cases in New Zealand, like population difference. And I know they're going to say many thousands of New Zealanders are going to get this, but I'm looking for that 1,000-person mark. Not to say success or failure, but just to think some other countries are doing really well and keeping their numbers down. What would be a result for New Zealand that would mean keeping the numbers down? What would be a result for New Zealand that would mean okay with these numbers? What would be a result for New Zealand which would mean shit, we missed the boat and this is too much? I'm not saying I want to know that because then we can be judgy pricks about it, but
no,
I think the worst thing that happened is we maybe went a day too late, but actually in the grander scheme of things, like you look to the UK, they were fucking saying that they were going to use the herd mentality for a while and basically let it go through the population. The morons that were in leadership there, that certainly compared to some, we went plenty early, or certainly a lot earlier than many. So yeah, pretty happy.
It was, I mean, that was Boris being a twat again. But I'm glad they didn't do the herd immunity thing, because that would have killed a lot more people and caused a lot more problems than it would have solved.
Well, they're talking about in New Zealand, they're talking about banks giving a 6-month mortgage holiday, and being government and like legislated by the government. Now, I'm sure that doesn't mean everybody, but those who are affected by it being able to have, and normally when you take a bank holiday, you still get charged the interest, but no interest, no capital for 6 months. I heard Australia, I quite like this idea. Australia talking yesterday about, although what's his name's over there is the knob end. Do you know that the most trusted politician in Australia at the moment is Jacinda Ardern? Like honestly, they do the polls and they ask the public of Australia who is the most trusted politician, and they say Jacinda Ardern. How crazy is that? So anyway, they did this thing. They had this idea yesterday where they said that they would basically go into hibernation. And the only way that could work is if with their banks, they did the same thing. So what the banks will do, I'm extrapolating now about what that means. I could be wrong. But the banks will then give a mortgage holiday to the building owners, who will then not charge rent to the businesses. And basically in 6 months from now, they'll just pick up and keep going, and no one's incurred all that debt. And the government will obviously then pay the workers some version of a benefit or a subsidy or whatever it's going to be, and then just come back in 6 months and start all over again, which I think is, I quite like that idea as well. I mean, I've extrapolated because I hadn't read the details, but that's what it would mean to me.
Yeah, I think they need to be doing something. I mean, they are surprisingly doing some supportive stuff over here now for both freelancers and full-time people, and you're never going to make everyone happy. I mean, I'm kind of blown away by what they're doing based on you know, what their past has been like. And I know a lot of my friends would, I mean, I've not said that publicly before. I know one of my friends would argue that, you know, they're not doing it. You know, they just spend the whole time moaning. And I'm like, well, from what I thought they were going to do, I'm kind of blown away. I didn't think they would do. I didn't think they would support us at that level. I didn't think they would be trying to sort out a package that works for freelancers as well as full-time people. I didn't think that you know, that, yeah, there's just a lot of things about it that I'm impressed by, even though I, again, probably would never vote Tory.
Yeah.
So, and I think you can say that. Do you know what I mean? I think you should be allowed to be impressed by them at this point.
I think in times
There's
of
a lot of things wrong, by the way. They're doing a lot of things. I'm not saying they're doing everything right.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think in times of extreme conflict or extreme events, there's also kind of like the only time the GOP in America, sorry to completely continue to reference American politics, but the only time the Republicans have won the popular vote in the last 30-ish years is George W. Bush's second term, and that was after 9/11. They won the popular vote. We had a mayor in New Zealand, Bob Parker, who was, my understanding was significantly behind in the polls to be the mayor of Christchurch. And then the Christchurch earthquakes happened, and he was a phenomenal leader, and he, you know, was put back in. He romped back in, because the people get behind the people. So even as you're saying, you know, you're not maybe a Tory supporter or a Tory fan, but they're doing some things that will cause a community to get behind them. I think that is also why, even through this whole disaster in America, I don't know, I think it might have leveled the playing field a little bit, but it might mean Trump actually gets back. And most people are thinking the coronavirus is going to be the reason he loses. But you know, the historical looking at it is, you know, Winston Churchill got through the war, and then after the war, when all the you know, all the restrictions were still in place, that's when the backlash happened. But during the war, the support was there for him. One of the reasons I think Labour will romp back in here, but yeah, again, not to go back to politics now, but it's going to be intriguing how this plays out in the US for him. I think, hey, listen, I don't know how long we've been talking, because we're doing this on Zoom and I see no countdown. I actually have no clue. I think it's been an hour and a half or something. Before we sign off, what are you doing I was thinking maybe we could do a little, you know, give some people some heads up as to good content out there. So, like, for example, I love watching stand-up comedy. Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer have just released their stand-up specials on Netflix. Tom Segura is probably my favorite comedian. Just brilliant, amazing content to watch. Really, really interesting stuff to check out as well. Obviously, you've been quarantined for longer than me. What have you been doing? What can you let people know about? Not necessarily direct content, just ideas you've been doing to keep yourself occupied.
Sure. Well, I tell you what, there's a few things. Hang on, let me get my podcast app up, because there's like 3 that I've been listening to consistently. Well, there's a Parapod, which I would recommend to anyone. It's 2 of my friends, so full disclosure. One's a skeptic, one's a believer, and they argue about which one. They've just been the first podcast to become a film. And I saw the film at the premiere in London last year before all this kicked off. And yeah, it's more about friendship than ghosts and mythologies and things. And as someone who was looking into starting a podcast about mysteries, you know, I've really been inspired by what they've been doing. So highly recommend them.
So give us what's the name of the podcast again?
Parapod.
Parapod. Parapod.
Yeah.
Parapod. Okay.
Hello from the Magic Tavern. Which is really big over in America, and so people, when I mention over here, surprising number of people know about it. So I don't know if is it a thing over there? Because if it is,
I haven't heard of it.
Based on the fact you like Lord of the Rings, you might like this. It's very nerd. It's real nerd. So here's the intro that he gives every time. His name's Arnie Niekamp, and he fell through a dimensional rift behind a Burger King in Chicago into magical land of Thun, where he does a podcast with a shape-shifting badger and a wizard, or the blue, where they interview different mythical people each week. It's completely improvised, and it's all improvised comedy. It's absolutely amazing. It gets better. I would say start with episode 3, because the first two are absolute dog shit. And the first time I gave it a listen, I started with the first episode. I thought it was awful. I left it alone. My friend said, no, just skip the first one because it's finding its feet. It wasn't going to be good.
Sure.
Start on the third episode is still one of my favorite episodes of anything. It's called Flower. It's absolutely outstanding. So give that a whirl. And then there's Max and Ivan Fugitives, which is how many parts is it? It's 8-part fugitive, crime, kink, sex positive. You sort of got Russia elements, America, sort of trading information. It's really good. Just give it a whirl. So those have been my go-tos. For me, I've been starting live streams or trying to, but they're all pretty much on my Facebook. They won't be on anywhere else yet. I want to do them on YouTube. I've got an idea for a sitcom which I've been trying to write, but that's next week's job. And I've got, yeah. I mean, there's certain things that I've basically just been emailing production companies. Trying to, on the assumption that they're bored, on the assumption they probably got less on and there's not anything being made. So I would say that, follow me on Twitter. It's probably the best place to find me and follow things like that. This Made Me Cool is my Twitter. And I'll be doing a stream. I don't know whether it'll be Monday. I might have to move it because I've been getting used to streaming, but I've got my first, third and fourth, which is my latest show. I've got recordings of them, and I'm going to do a live stream of the video and then a Q&A afterwards of my latest stand-up shows, which I've not seen anyone do before. I've seen them stream their special or put it on YouTube, but I've not seen anyone do a stream and then a Q&A.
Yeah, no.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I've got some. I don't actually want to talk about it yet because what typically happens is you say, I'm going to do this, and then the technology doesn't quite hit over. But I've certainly got some ideas. It depends when we drop this. This is funny that this is like podcast number 75 or something, and it's the first one I've ever pre-recorded. I normally just live stream it, so I live stream the podcast as well. So I'm not quite sure when this will drop. But if people keep an eye on Department of Conversation, the doc.nz or Department of Conversation on Facebook, there's some stuff coming up. We've got a few ideas to do with live stream interaction as well, and not because I see lots of people are chucking their iPhones up in front of themselves doing a DJ set, but I'm looking to get this to be a two-way medium, and that's some stuff that I'm looking at doing over the next wee while as well. And it's actually something, ironically, that I don't know if you ever send it to you. I normally do when people are coming on. If anyone ever got my business proposal for the podcast this year, the stuff that I'm probably going to launch during the next 4 weeks is stuff that's in that business for this year anyway. Just bringing everything forward because we're all pretty time rich at the moment. Yeah, you didn't send it to me, but we actually had a bit of a talk about it beforehand. You're right. Hey, thank you for doing this. All right. Thanks for having me. This has been a blast, actually, and the technology's worked quite well. This is where I hit stop record on Zoom and realized nothing's actually saved, and then we go, crap, can we do that again? But no. People want to follow you again. Twitter again. This Made Me Cool is my Twitter feed. And you have podcasts as well, and they can find your podcast or various podcasts, I think, through your website. Yeah. What's your website again? SimonCaine.co.uk. I mean, the main one that people, the problem is, so I've got one where I interviewed like TV commissioners, agents, reviewers and stuff, which is called Ask the Industry. And a lot of people know that within the industry. And more recently, comedy fanatics are listening to it because it's quite interesting for that. Yep. But I've got, I think check out my website because I've got 2 that will either be coming out in podcast form from me, or I'm going to try and get them made a little bit more professionally on like the BBC or something. So yeah, check out Ask the Industry, or just Google my name in iTunes, because I've got about 5 podcasts. So that I rotate. Drew, only 5? What have you been doing with your time? I know. Well, to be honest with you, this was pre the quarantine, so I didn't have as much time. So hey, Simon Caine, thanks so much for jumping in with us today. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.